Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reiki Women Podcast. This is Michaela Daystar with Heartscapes Reiki. And with me today, as always, is my beautiful cohort, Bronwen Logan from Reiki with Bronwen and Carrie Varela from the Reiki Healing Society. So, we are circling around today to another topic that is really kind of covers two sides of the spectrum, both sides of the experience of a Reiki session. So, we want to talk with Reiki practitioners and with potential Reiki clients about how we can support people in having a good experience in their Reiki session. And so as we're having this conversation, I just really invite you to think about, the roles that you have played inside of a Reiki session. Perhaps you are a practitioner, you have offered Reiki, perhaps you are studying and endeavoring to offer Reiki sessions to people in the future, perhaps that you have received Reiki sessions or would like to in the future. From wherever you are in that relationship to a Reiki session, just invite you to think about what do you need in order to have a good experience inside of that session? That's the question that we're pondering today, and I'm sure there will be many things to learn, including on each of our behalf. I look forward to learning how the two of you support people in having good sessions, and perhaps what you need when you go to a Reiki practitioner in order to have a good experience. So I am going to pitch it over to you, Bronwen, to get us started.
Thank you, Michaela. I had a little bit of Reiki yesterday, actually, and oh God, it's so gorgeous. Someone said before, you sort of get used to it. I don't know if you ever do get used to it. Every time I think I've ever had a Reiki treatment, it's how to even describe that feeling of just letting go into that space, and it's spectacular. I really love it. And I hope to always be able that my clients will also experience that. It's almost like a sense of magic, isn't it? When we just really tap back into this space of, I don't know, it's like a truthfulness inside of us, things fall away. And I had a client on the weekend who actually said, and I think that's quite normal for people, like, I just don't know how to describe that. And I think that's very true. How do you describe it? But that's not what we're talking about right now. We are talking about how to get the most out of it, right? So I think for me, there's one word, and that word is open. So what I want for my clients is that they can feel open enough to allow healing to happen. So that's where I want to be with them, and that's where I want to help them with that. So if you have a new client, someone comes for the very first time, I mean, it's sort of weird, isn't it? You hop up on a table, you lie down, this stranger is there sort of telling you things, whether you understand it or not. Maybe you don't know anything about energy work at all, and you feel a bit nervous, or a bit I don't know, maybe excited, whatever the feeling is. And how does the practitioner help you to translate that into being open? And by open, I mean relaxing, so not being nervous, not having expectation, being able to completely trust that you're going to be safe and comfortable, and that whatever happens to you, it's not someone doing something to you, so you don't have to be fearful of someone's ulterior motives or plan for you or anything like that. That it's actually that you can understand for yourself that you at some level are in control of this experience, and that control, I'm not talking about mental control. I'm talking about this idea of how we're made up, that we're made up of body, so physical, mental, yes, but also then that spiritual part of us as well, and how these elements all work together. They're totally interconnected. They're not separate, and that they're always looking for a way to find balance. And when we have a Reiki treatment, for me, that balance is what I want the body to have the opportunity to refine, to move back into. So this is not necessarily a conscious experience. So it's not like the client lies there and goes, okay, so I'm going to make my spirit do this and my body do this and my mind do this. It's not like that at all. In fact, the best thing that we could ever possibly do is get out of the way and be open. So if we're open, that just means that we're not holding on to anything that's going to stop those three elements finding their balance. And I think I'm going to stop there because I'm sure you guys got heaps to add to that. So go for it, Carrie.
I love that you can like sum up everything with one word, Bronwen. That's really beautiful. And I think openness really is the such a key element, right? It's so important. And even when we're kind of just curious about Reiki, or if it's our first time, a lot of times that openness is actually takes time to drop into. Because for me, myself, even years after, Reiki's been in my life for over a decade and a half, that like it's so easy to just contract around our suffering and around those places in our life where we are really struggling, or to just, feel and hold loving space for, whatever it is in our intention to heal or transform. And what I love about Reiki, but what I love about Reiki is that it is so flexible. It's so surprising. Somebody can come in and say, well, I'm going through a breakup, but my left elbow really hurts. And then I also, have been suffering from anxiety, and the list can go really on and on. It can be circumstances in your life. It can be physical issues. It can be mental and emotional struggles. And yet Reiki is so versatile and flexible that it can work with all of those things. But, I think when we kind of load it down with expectation, as you were talking about too, then that also really is part of the things that get in the way of the practice. And I recall a long while ago, somebody came to receive a Reiki treatment from me, and he had mentioned about how he had this just really powerful, transformative healing session, energy work session a while back. And really he had it in his mind that that he needed to reach that, or there was no other point in doing the session with me. And I was like, okay, well, sorry, I don't know. I mean, I can't, open your crown chakra for you. I can't like force an experience to you, but that's what's so lovely and beautiful about Reiki, is that when we just allow ourselves to meet ourselves at where we're at in that given moment, that's really when the magic can happen, when we can let all of those expectations go and just be in that organic moment. And I feel like I'm diverging a little bit off topic, but when I'm in a Reiki session and when I've received Reiki, and I think when my clients have experienced those transformative experiences within Reiki, you'll notice that one of those precursors is that you were able to let go and relax into the experience and not try to force anything mentally, or in the process. Oh, I gotta direct energy into my left knee. And if you're thinking like that, you're not going to get a whole lot out of the session. And you're going to feel like you need to control your experience, which is a little bit different than putting yourself in the driver's seat of your experience, which is also important as well. And I think a good Reiki practitioner can help you do that. So just other things that I think are helpful to get the most out of your Reiki session. First of all, if I'm working with a client for the first time, I like to spend extra time with them. So, at least try to set it up for another extra 15 minutes with them. Kind of depends on how long this session we have scheduled. But if it's a 60-minute session, I like to spend 75 minutes with them if I can. Because I want to tell you a little bit about Reiki. I want to give you a little background on what Reiki is, my own experiences of Reiki, my personal point of view and perspective. Gives time people to sign a waiver and kind of set up, some boundaries and expectations of each other for the treatment. And I think that one thing that's really brought me a lot, I think has been really supportive for my clients and for myself, is to encourage my new clients to come and do at least 3 Reiki sessions with me. So I do a package on my sessions of 3. So you can purchase an individual session, which I totally do that. And sometimes new clients just want to do 1 session. I totally understand that. But I do tend to encourage people to book 3 sessions because it just allows one to kind of deepen their experience of Reiki. And so much of what you were talking about, Bronwen, and so on point is just like you come in for a Reiki session for the first time, and maybe you've experienced one from somebody else or never experienced one before. It's like you just don't know what to expect. Yeah. And so there's just so much of that unknown, and maybe there's a curiosity there, but you don't know what to expect. And so it is kind of hard to relax and to be in the moment and to feel connected to the Reiki practitioner, and then also, of course, like in a deeper level, getting that connection to Reiki and to your spirit. That whole process takes some time to develop that trust and that experience of Reiki. And so, that's why I encourage more sessions, I think, at least initially. And and what I found is that, when people come to me a little bit more regularly, they really are able to drop in more deeply into the experience of receiving Reiki and tend to have more powerful treatments. Powerful is kind of an overwhelming word, because what I want them to experience is just a deeper sense of balance, a greater clarity around what's bothering them, to feel more in their body, to feel more centered and present and strong and capable to address those areas of their life that, are particularly challenging for them. So I think that just comes with trust and time. And, I also feel like there's a tendency to be pretty self-judgmental. Maybe, I don't know, in the world of energy, people are like, oh, don't, I don't know how my energy is, because, they're just either curious about that or feel a little bit, I don't know, unsure of themselves. And so I think that also what I really like to do and set people up with is just this container to know that I'm not judging them. I'm not judging their energy as good or bad or anything. I am just holding space for them to relax and realign, and that whatever they're feeling in that moment, whatever they're experiencing or witnessing inside of themselves, that they can do that. And I'm not trying to psychically read them or try to figure them out or to certainly just not judging them, not judging them for having feelings and thoughts and emotions and energy that needs to let go of. Like, that's exactly what I'm there to help them facilitate, that release. So I'm sure, Michaela, you have so many thoughts to share on this topic. So let's pass it over to you.
Thank you. I love what's already come forward and, really kind of thinking around this question from the perspective of the different roles that one could have inside of a Reiki session. So I wanted to respond a little bit on the side of, what we as Reiki practitioners can do, what our mindset can be. and therefore our actions to help our clients have the best session possible. And then what can we, as receivers of Reiki sessions of clients, how might we also participate in making sure that our session is as good as possible? And I love, Bronwen, that you started us with openness as part of the goal, like where we want everybody involved in that transaction and that experience to achieve a sense of openness. And you mentioned some of the characteristics that requires, or some of the characteristics that would entail: trust, safety, connection, relaxation. These are all qualities that help us to sink into a state of openness and remain there for the duration of the session, and hopefully for a good amount of time after the session. So the question then is, like, how do we get ourselves and other folks to that place of feeling trust, feeling safe, feeling connected, and therefore feeling open? And Carrie, you definitely named a few important pieces of that. I love that you talked about expectations. I think both of you talked about that. The expectations that we have and that our clients have, and how we can kind of set up expectations that support openness versus expectations that might take us into a different direction. So when I think about this question, I think the place I've spent the most amount of time contemplating this question of how to achieve the best possible Reiki session is through the lens of the work I've done on being trauma informed in our Reiki practice, because really that's kind of what that is about. How can we create a system, a container for our Reiki sessions that is made up of our own mindsets, and then therefore the practices and procedures that we put into place in our sessions, some which will happen routinely every time, things that really can and should be done every time for everybody who comes through our door, and then places where we can be flexible and we can really pay attention to what a particular person needs in order to get what they need out of the session. And that really begins with information, right? What information does a person need in order to feel that sense of trust, feel that they're safe, feel connected with the person, and therefore be able to feel open? That amount of information is going to vary widely, right, from person to person. But there's a few things that I always share with everybody. And both of you have alluded to some of it. Firstly, that the person with the authority of the experience of the Reiki session is the person receiving the Reiki session. They are the authority on their own experience. Therefore, they are empowered to make requests, to ask questions, to make adjustments, to make changes during the session, and to end the session if they need to. Yeah. I always affirm that the person who is coming for their session, is in control of it in a lot of ways. And I love that juxtaposition, Bronwen, that you spoke to, of like having that control that comes from inner authority, from inner power that we each inherently have, versus the control of trying to like mentally be in control of the experience, right? There's almost a paradox there of like that feeling of empowered control over my experience, allowing for my mind to relax and to recede and to let go. And people are going to need different things, right, to achieve that level of feeling their own power so that they can relax. Certainly, Carrie, you mentioned they need to know what our particular perspective is on Reiki, how we approach a session, what's going to happen in the session, to the degree that they want to know. I certainly have clients who are like, don't tell me, I don't need to know, let's just go. But usually people want to know some level of like, what's going to happen, right? What can I expect? And in particular, I'm talking about people who are relatively new, but even someone who's just new to you, who has experienced Reiki in other ways. So beginning there with that, affirming that that their inherent power is what is kind of holding the container of the session. That my perspective, and I know we share this perspective at least to a certain degree, is that any healing or balancing or coming into wholeness that a person will experience is coming from them. That their system knows exactly what they need and is fully capable of bringing that about. It is in fact working towards that sense of balance already, and that what I'm there to do is hold a space for that process to continue to happen and to be maximized, and to, kind of create a space where that process can happen unencumbered. So, whatever messaging is right for each of us to share with the person that affirms their authority in the room, that they are, the expert of their own experience, and that therefore they get to make decisions and to collaborate with us in what happens. That our mindset about the experience is that their system knows exactly what it needs, that we're there to support. I like that you said, the affirming that we're not doing something, we're not controlling something, we're not changing something about them, we're being with them in a way that supports the healing that they're already doing. From there, logistical information about flexibility that they can experience. One of the things that's so lovely about Reiki is it's so flexible. Unlike something like massage or acupuncture or acupressure, chiropractics, where there are things that we need them to do, right? We need them to be in particular positions. We're going to need to manipulate their body in a particular way in order to get the outcome. Reiki, we don't really need them to be in any particular position to support them, right? There may be positions we prefer that might feel easier for us, or that might allow us to feel like we're being more thorough or that we're more comfortable. But truly, we can begin with, how would you be most comfortable? What does your body want in this moment? Do you want to be seated? Do you want to be lying down? In what position? And that can change at any time during the session, that's not an interruption, that's part of the collaboration. And it's amazing how often sharing that type of information with people, how often I've observed and then had them give feedback that helped them to relax, to kind of let their nervous system calm down, to feel more engaged in the system, in the session, and to feel more hopeful about the potential outcomes when they were, when they hear that the perspective that we're working inside of is that their system absolutely knows what it needs and is going to get support in that. So all of that is to say, the information that we provide, particularly at the beginning of a session, is essential in the experience that they're going to have. Related to that, as you said, is expectations, right? How do we set their expectation for what is possible? And that is something that I would also share with folks who are coming for a session, is to know what your desired outcome is, which could be, I just want to have the experience, right? I just want to relax and do it. I just want to see what this is. That is a totally wonderful goal to have. But, to have a certain sense of what you do expect out of the session and to share that with your person. And then on the other side, if somebody shares an expectation with you that you feel is maybe not well aligned with what you know that you can provide, to be honest about that, right? So to have that level of honesty that allows you to set your expectations in a place that are aligned with each other. And, if we think about it again through a trauma-informed lens, this absolutely includes, us being really clear about what our capacities are and what they aren't, what our expertise is and what it isn't, what we are trained and capable of addressing and what we are not, and having resources that we can share with them when their expectation kind of moves outside of our expertise, being able to connect them with other folks who can meet them wherever that expectation is. Again, all of that provides that sense of safety and openness and trust when we're just super honest and clear and we get our expectations set in the front end. Again, the amount that people will need that level of information is going to vary, but I think if we can really have some sense of shared expectation, we're going to be much better off. From there, I could go on and on about information, but I'm going to stop right there. But I did just want to also name, then of course the physical container, right, that we hold, which includes, obviously the accommodations for them to get comfortable, having as many different types of props available, having different types of temperature controls available, different types of music or no music available, any other, things that a practitioner likes to use. but always coming back to flexibility and choice, allowing the person to choose what they want or don't want and to consent to what they do or don't want, including and especially touch, right? That's always part of that information that is always asked in the beginning, and that I always share with every client, even if they're a repeat client, that Reiki can be shared equally well with or without touch, and it is up to what that person would feel most supported by in a given moment. And so, one of the things that I advise people to think about in terms of their physical space and any other types of extra products or experiences that they might want to bring into their Reiki session, things like, using crystals or sound or scents, scented oils, movement, anything else that one might want to bring into their session, to make those things available and to, again, allow people to choose and consent to whether or not they receive those things. We can never know what's going to feel supportive or feel unsupportive or even triggering or frightening to a person, or just medically unsound, particularly if you're thinking about scent. My mother is very extremely chemically sensitive. If a person just brought scent into a session without her consent, it would make her immediately ill. So, the mindset there is that there are things that we might personally, as a practitioner and as a receiver of sessions, find supportive and lovely and wonderful that we want to share, but not necessarily everybody is going to find those things to be supportive. And so, at its essence, right, sharing Reiki is simple, right? And anything else that we bring into that space is optional and it's flexible. And the more that we allow people to make choices, the better their outcome is going to be. Similarly, on the receiver side, if there's something particular that you want to experience, that you want your practitioner to include, you want clarity on whether or not the practitioner works in that way. For example, I often have people asking me, do I provide, psychic information or readings along with my Reiki sessions? And I don't. And so I really appreciate when people ask me that, right? Because then again, I can be clear and set those expectations. There are other things that I can fold into a session very skillfully that aren't necessarily part of the baseline session, but that are options. So those kinds of conversations can really set us up for success on either side of that equation. And I could say more, but I'm going to pause right there and just see what else has come up for the two of you.
Wow, that was amazing, Michaela. What a summing up. Fantastic. Yeah, what so much great information there, right? Fantastic. Yeah, I was just thinking what a great job we have, right? It really is just such a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of. It's very special. Oh, look, I wrote down a few things, just little points. One thing I didn't mention was that I guess I didn't say how I actually started a treatment. And Carrie, you were saying about telling people about, what it is that you do. And I do that too. And you know how I do it? I will often start by, I just say, I just sort of more or less straight away get them up onto the table. And I place my hands at their head and I start talking to them. This is, and I say, look, I'm only going to talk for a couple of minutes, then I'll be quiet. But, just that I'm already moving into that space and I'm already getting them familiar with that space. And that's the way I like to do it. And I enjoy doing it that way. So there's sort of like this very natural, organic movement into the actual treatment. I do explain, where I'm going to start, where I'm going to end, that and that at the end, I give a little massage on the feet or whatever, so that they're not sitting there thinking, once again, while they're lying there, what's going to happen? How will I know if she's finished? And I explain that sometimes, yes, the hands will be on the body or off the body. And, we can have a discussion about that if necessary. That I don't touch any private parts of the body is something I always say. And I sometimes can really feel people just visibly relax when you say that, because you name it, right? And they just know, oh, thank goodness, I don't even have to think about that, right? I put a blanket on the person, a light blanket. So they're really very protected um, and comfortable. And I have a heated table, also something which I love, which, you know, helps people's bodies physically to relax and let go. And then I ask them, going back to that openness thing, I say to them to just repeat. I don't think I said this, no, just to repeat out loud this little saying which I wrote, and it's, I'm open to receive whatever it is that I might need at this exact moment in time. And I'll get them to repeat that, and then I'll say, so that means that that you know, it's up to you as to what you get out of this experience. And for me, that is sort of like a bit of a key for them to help them latch into that idea that, oh, I'm the person who's in control, like we've all just been talking about, you know. So I'm the person who's going to allow things to happen or not to happen. And I think that's a really helpful place to be. When I actually describe it, I often will describe it as me being in a meditative space. So I go into a meditative space, and that I share that with them, and that they feel that, and together we share that meditative space together, to give them some sort of context of what this is. And it's almost like I really love the idea of someone being there supporting me to meditate, because a lot of people think it's really difficult to meditate. Well, and probably, you know, actually it is. I think for many people, it's just that for most of us, I think, because it's it's something, there's something that we learn. And so it's lovely to have someone there actually being there for you, and holding that for you. And and you can have the experience of that. So it could be something that could bring you in your own life into discovering more about meditation, and finding that, moving into that space yourself without someone else. So it could be a good start for someone to do that. When we were talking about positions, and you were just both saying how flexible it is, and I absolutely love that about this. And, you know, if someone's in a hospital, you could, you know, and they've got plaster from head to toe, you can still do Reiki, you know, and you can just hold a person's hand. You can, you know, whatever is required, you can be there and be there for someone, which is just such a beautiful thing. And I guess it all comes down to that we don't take away from a client. And I think that's what people need to keep in mind. Don't take from them. Don't take their power. Don't take what we want to allow this person to have the best possible experience of understanding what it means to heal yourself, and we're there to support you with that. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love all of this. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, other than what I feel like it hasn't, we haven't touched base into a little bit, is also just letting Reiki do the work, you know, and trusting and letting the results of the session really be released to Reiki, like not like forcing it. And I had a session this morning, and you know, it just really struck me really poignantly today. I was like, get out of your own way. How do you get out of your own way? How do you do that? You know, and that's just, you know, it's the dance, it's the art of Reiki, is you know, showing up for somebody and being willing to just sit there and listen and hold space for them, as you were talking about, and Michaela and Bronwen, and witness for them that the power of their intention. If they have an intention for the session, just sitting with them and really trusting that's it for them. That's their truth. That's really what they want to achieve out of the session. And an intention is a lot different than an expectation. It is this willingness to say, this is where I need help. This is where I'm seeking, um, healing and transformation. And as a practitioner, not trying to do it for them, which is really hard sometimes too, right? It's like, oh, okay. Oh, wait, you need balance in this area of your life. Okay, well, I'll give you 5 billion different things that help me find balance, or do this or do that. And I think that's why probably, I don't want to speak for all of you, but as a collective on this podcast, we talk a lot about how, sometimes combining Reiki as a psychic reading, it is trying to do the work for them. And there's a difference between naming that truth that really feels like palpably there in the session. This is the truth for them. And it's not to discount also the gift of intuitive mediumship and psychic reading. I have friends who have that gift, and their insight and wisdom is so invaluable, so welcome when it's welcome, right? When we set up that proper expectation and container to work with our client, to really share with them, like, this is my scope of practice. This is what I have in my heart to share. And I know for me, a lot of times in my Reiki sessions is like a guided meditation really will come through, and on an invitation, I'm feeling the Reiki move in a certain direction or move in a certain way. And I really want to name that for the client so that they can drop into the experience, this collective experience that we're both having. I might have mentioned this before on other podcasts, but just that, if you come to anything with healing in mind and openness for healing, it will be there. And I think of that with like a counseling session, maybe in a counseling session, you really want to talk about this certain aspect of your life. But when you get there, it also depends on your counselor and just the flow of the conversation. And even if you get to that kind of topic that you might want to address or are curious to address, but sometimes that doesn't even happen, right? But that there's still nonetheless so much insight and so much awareness that can come when two people come together in order to provide that light and illumination for someone, when we're really seeking that and trust somebody else to help us access that information, both inside of ourselves, but also to receive their wisdom and guidance. But besides that, it's also just like really holding, if the session gets too chatty, it doesn't allow for that beautiful energy of Reiki to shine through. And for us to relax into that space, we really can let go. And in that moment of letting go, whoa, like something happens, or you have this profound experience of the energy that's moving through you. And there's really not words to describe those experiences. They're really, beyond words. And I think that's what people are truly seeking in a Reiki session, whether they're aware of it or not, that's what they're really seeking. And the other day I had a session too, and I just was reminded, I love how you said it, Bronwen, just how lovely what we do is, but just how soothing and comforting it is to have somebody's hands on you. And there's no, I don't know, that's what I really like. I just melt into the practice of receiving Reiki. Is just like, oh my gosh, this person's hands on me. And even as they move maybe down my body or whatever, there's just this beautiful release that's happening. You can feel a shift from where their hands were as to where they are now. And, I think at the heart of what I feel like I'm transmitting and receiving in a Reiki session is just feeling more connected to the pulse of life. And so there's this deep, like, inner nourishment that's happening, that's in a realm of awareness that's way beyond my mind and even my body. It's like I'm feeling so fully recharged. And I can't do that for anyone. Like, as a Reiki practitioner, I can't do that, but I know that Reiki can do that. And so as much as I can, getting out of my own way so that kind of benefit can occur for people.
Mm.
I love this thread, this like through line that often comes out in our conversations, of really honoring and acknowledging that each person is empowered in their own experience, right? And that part of creating that container of trust and safety and openness does include encouraging them to trust themselves by us trusting the client, right? To trust their own knowing and their own way of getting there, right? And that what we're there to do is to help facilitate that experience of their own inner knowing, their own capacity, whether that is in a session where they're, you know, in a completely relaxed and passive state, or one where there is a more dynamic interaction where somebody might be sharing what they're experiencing and asking for support or advice, or having things come up in the session that they want addressed. And in those kinds of experiences in particular, another tool practice that has been really powerful for me to help me get out of my own way and to be in a state of trust and to be in a state of authenticity about what my gifts are and what they aren't, is a practice that a teacher of mine used to call artful inquiry. What are the questions that we can ask them that can help them to follow the threads of their own knowing, rather than being the ones to try to go in and address and fix what's happening? And, it's a subtle thing, and it's taken me a long time to really feel comfortable in it. But, being able to not be on either end of the extremes of either being, completely passive. For example, if we're always just like, well, what do you think? Like, oh, the person's reporting something. Well, what do you think? Well, what do you think? Always pitching it back to them without, kind of holding any authority in that conversation, versus the extreme opposite, which is where I've disclosed this on the podcast before. For the first few years of my practice, I very much thought that I was supposed to diagnose and treat and go in and do surgery on whatever it was that they were asking for. A very proactive, very doing kind of perspective on what my job was supposed to be. And not only did that put a lot of pressure on me, but it also was very disempowering for them. And what I've found, that kind of open, spacious place in the middle of those extreme opposites is this space where my expertise is in holding the container. My expertise is in creating that space of surrender and openness. And when they feel like they're running up against some kind of barrier or boundary that they want to have shifted, that they have identified, then I know the questions to ask and the ways to hold them and support them in order for them to work through it. An example that came to mind, Carrie, when you were talking, was a client I was working with recently who reported having a sensation of there being like energy trapped in her torso, as if it was like a pinball, like bouncing all over the place. And basically was like, what do I do about this? Or, can you fix that? Can you make it stop doing that? And, in that moment, like I had this memory of like past me would have been like, okay, oh no, what am I supposed to do about trapped energy? Okay, let me do this and this and this. And instead it was like, I don't know what she needs in this moment to shift this sensation of there being a pinball zipping around in her body, but her body knows, right? So let me go into a space where I can help her get grounded. And then from that place, let me ask her, what is your body telling you about the pathway for this energy? And she sat with that and she said, it's supposed to come out the side of my body. I would never have come up with that answer. I can just tell you right now, I would not have ever come up with the energy is supposed to zip out her side body, right? But that was the answer, right? Okay, great. So from there, I can hold space for that to happen. She can use her intention and her focus to do what her body just told her was necessary. And I know how to be with her in that process, and it was incredibly effective. So I've just, I'm just appreciating again this through line of each of us knows what we need. Even if we don't know consciously, we probably don't, but there's something in us that knows. And our job as a Reiki practitioner, in order to facilitate the best possible experience for our clients, which is our question today, includes being absolutely trusting that that is true, that they know what they need, and then knowing how to hold that space, that container. And that's not something that we can like tell you a bullet pointed list in this podcast of like, here's how you do that, right? But I think more available and perhaps valuable that we can share in this podcast is to be aware that that is your role, that your role is to facilitate the experience, to hold the space, to be present, to ask good questions, or to say nothing at all, and to trust in your own sense of groundedness, your own sense of spaciousness, your own sense of connection, to be really, really in touch with those things so that you can hold that space for them, because that's really where their system is trying to get to. And I think as we've each said today, it's so much about how we are more so than what we do. And even so, what we do as far as opening up that session really matters. And I think we've touched on a lot of really important pieces of what that can look like. Yeah. Anything else come up?
Yeah, just a few little things. I just thought, the thing is that we all want to help. That's why we're doing it, right? So, how we do that is obviously going to be different for everybody as well. Like, one thing that we didn't mention was listening. And I think, really, I find, well, before a treatment, I will ask why a client is here. And I think we've sort of touched on that a bit, but, ask why they're here. And it's not because I'm going to do anything about that, but they're heard for whatever it is, whatever it is that's going on for them, they're heard. And that's a really beautiful thing to be heard. And then also after a treatment to give time and space that someone might want to talk. We're not counselors. And I've always suggested, having basic counseling, unless we are counselors, but, have basic counseling skills. And, Michaela, you talked about how you would talk to someone and Carrie talking to people, you spoke about that as well. And I think, it's going to be different. We're all going to be different how we do that, because we're all going to have different skills and abilities. I mean, I love to listen to people after a treatment. Often people will really open up about themselves and feel good about that, and really release something that they've been wanting to release. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they feel it, but they don't have to talk about it, and they shouldn't be pushed to do that either. One thing I have always said is that that you can't make a mistake. Well, you can make a mistake, but the energy can't make a mistake, right? And we can make mistakes. And so we need to be very aware of our humanness and our, things we've talked about today, sometimes our need to over-involve ourselves or whatever it is for our own self-security, worries, fears that we might have inside of us. And so we're also always learning when we do this, because we're learning about ourselves. And I think, Carrie, you talked about, getting out of the way, learning to do that is incredibly difficult. And it's so powerful if we can learn that, because we can bring it into so many aspects of our life outside of just a Reiki treatment. There was something else about that. Oh, I know. I was just thinking that for a client as well. I had a client the other day who said, I'm really, they hadn't had a treatment a Reiki treatment before, but they lay down on the table and they said, I have to tell you, I'm really bad at this sort of thing. See, and this is where we get in our way. So it's not just the practitioner, it can also be the client, having some ideas about that they can't be healed, or that they don't know how to heal, or whatever it is, right? So helping people understand that, but clients, that they can't make a mistake either, energetically, that they know. And I think, we have so many wonderful ways within what we've just spoken about today to help people and to help ourselves. It's really very powerful without actually getting in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything final words for you, Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the one kind of as a tag on to that is, there is some discourse within the Reiki communities, like, Reiki can do no harm, and, your mental, emotional state isn't that important as a Reiki practitioner. I've come to learn that it is really important. So, if you come into a session mentally agitated, frustrated, angry, whatever, emotionally volatile, our capacity to hold space. Sometimes, we have to at least widen it enough to hold space for ourselves in those moments. And but I think that that's part of getting out of your own way is setting aside your own stuff and just being there with them. Having any expectations for yourself out of the session. And then also, it's not, I mean, I think I'm always concerned about, I want this client to have a positive experience. I want them to rebook and all of that. But it's like, you got to get out of that mindset too, because really we only have that time with them. And even if they are a regular returning client, that's wonderful. But we still have to show up and give them the best session that we can give in that moment. And that's what will bring them back, as a returning customer to us. And for those who receive Reiki, just again, remember just to let go of self-consciousness, of just feeling self-conscious about the whole experience. And if you can, really surrender that and just relax into being held energetically. I think you'll have an incredible Reiki session.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I really appreciate those points, Carrie. And I mean, and that's one of the reasons that we always emphasize the importance of making the distinction between Reiki as a phenomenon in the world and the system of Reiki, a series of practices enacted by people with other people, and the idea that one, the phenomenon, Reiki energy, can do no harm, and can do, can be, all the things we need it to be. But people enacting things with other people, like my kids down the hall enacting some shenanigans that y'all can probably hear right now, we can cause harm, right? We can make mistakes, as you said, Bronwen. And if we kind of lean on, well, Reiki can cause harm, therefore I can cause no harm. First of all, it's lazy and it's unsafe, right? It's unsafe. And so it is important that we pay attention, to our mindsets and, the idea of what is actually happening. If we believe that all that we need to, share Reiki is an attunement and some hand positions, then yeah, sure, it doesn't matter where my mindset is going. It doesn't matter if I'm distracted or anxious or, whatever. I think most Reiki practitioners would say that certainly we don't want to be doing a Reiki session if we're agitated or upset or whatever. But, I have definitely heard folks say, if we're spacing out, if we're not paying attention, that doesn't matter because we've used our symbols and we've said our mantras and we've turned on Reiki, and so Reiki's just going to flow. We don't have to be involved. And I really want to just encourage all of us to really think about empowerment in the act of Reiki, both, the empowerment of everybody involved, and that with empowerment comes self-responsibility and the responsibility to be in our practice and to remain, in our own state of groundedness and openness and connection and focus, when we are in that space with our clients, so that we don't cause harm and we can listen and we can create that space for them. So super important themes that I know circle through this podcast all the time, and it's because they just really are that important. So friends, we really appreciate y'all listening to this conversation. We would love to hear from you. What do you need in a Reiki session in order to have your best experience, to feel safe, to feel open? For those of you who are practitioners, what do you do? What is your practices for ensuring the best possible experience for your clients? And if any of you do want to learn more about how you can make your practice a trauma-informed practice, I do have a self-paced course for practitioners that walks through that topic in great detail. We'll put a link to that in the show description. So until next time, thank you so much for being with you. Thank you for being with you. And thank you for being with us as we are with us. There's a little weirdness for you at the end. Thanks so much for being with us. Until next time, we love you. Goodbye.